Today, I am going to show you one of my most recent furniture makeovers on this thrifted piece. It was listed for $65, but on that day, it happened to be Thrifty Third Thursday. So at one of my thrift stores, every third Thursday of the month, everything is marked down by 30%. So that was a good deal for me. I loved this dresser, but I especially loved the hardware. It was so unique and beautiful. I brought it home and started doing a little bit further inspection. Obviously, the top is pretty rough. There was some veneer damage, several chips that would need to be filled, and I was not planning on refinishing this piece. I wanted to paint it all, and I had a color already in mind. But while I was doing my inspection, you guys, I found that one of the beautiful handles was broken. I didn't even notice that in the thrift store. And it broke my heart a little bit because that was one of the things that I loved most about this piece. I really, really wanted to be able to clean up and use the original hardware. I already have 2 drawers in the house at this point because I wanted to start with the drawers. So that's why you're not seeing them here. What I did first was sanded it down. This is a scuff sanding. I've told you guys about this before. I'm basically using 220 grit just to get kind of a surface layer off of the drawer, and that will help with paint adhesion. You want to make sure before you start painting to tape off the hardware holes so that any paint from the outside doesn't drip inside of your drawer. This is the color that I knew I wanted to use. And don't worry, you guys, I don't typically paint over my rugs. I was doing this for the aesthetics. I thought it would look prettier. And yeah, but normally I don't do that. Anyway, you guys, this color is called Ember Rune by Melange. It's the paint that I always use, and this is one of their new colors. It's this deep kind of rusty smoked paprika color. So good. Look at this one coat coverage, you guys. Obviously, I am going to do more coats, but this coverage is amazing. A lot of times with highly saturated colors, especially like reds or oranges, even yellows, the coverage isn't that great, but this one, wow, I was very impressed with that one coat coverage. And once again, using my favorite brush, this is the Rachel by Melange. And now back to the hardware dilemma, you guys. I finally came up with an idea where I could save some of the original handles, but yet use some new hardware to kind of pull it all together. I brought all of the drawers in and kind of set them up like they would be in the dresser. And then I found some hardware in my stash that I thought coordinated really nicely with the original handles. So what I did is I filled the holes on the top 2 drawers. They have kind of a curve in them, and I felt like because there was already knobs on the middle drawers, maybe adding a knob to the top 2 would work, and it did. I used Quickwood to fill in those holes and then drilled a new hole, and now I am sanding the rest of the drawers. So again, this is scuff sanding, you guys, just to get the drawer ready for paint, and I'm using 220 grit, and these are also the drawers that some of them that I had to fill the hardware holes in on, so you can see me kind of working that Quickwood down a little bit. It really is essential to scuff sand your pieces before painting them. I often get asked, do I have to sand it down to raw wood? No, you don't, but a good scuff sand is essential. So here are those top drawers with the holes filled, but I don't want to be able to see any trace of those. So what I do is I go over top of that with another wood filler. And I'm just using my finger here and kind of going over that filled area. I will let this dry and set up, and then I will sand this back again. Okay, so now we are ready to paint the rest of the drawers. You guys saw earlier that I already had some of them done, and that really is one of my tips to you guys. When you have a bigger project, just break it down. Sometimes I just am overwhelmed with the size of it, and sometimes I just don't have the room to bring everything in. So I'll work on just a few drawers at a time or just the frame of the piece. And that's kind of what I did here. So I am brushing on my paint using my Rachel brush. As I said before, it's so smooth. I love it so much. You want to make sure to use long strokes, and you also want to use a light hand. So you don't want to press the paint in super hard. And I also like to do thin coats. You can water down your paint or mist your brush or mist your piece with a, like a spray bottle, but I didn't feel I needed to with this particular paint color. It went on very easily and very smooth. Again, you guys, I am just in awe of that coverage. And now it's time to get to work on the frame of the dresser. As I showed you guys before, there was some veneer damage that needed to be repaired, and that top was just really a mess. So I started by filling in the veneer damage with Quickwood. I love this product. It's a 2-part epoxy. You mix it together and then apply it to your piece, and then it hardens. And then of course you're gonna need to sand it back once it is cured. And you can see I have a few spots all over the dresser that needed this. While that's curing, I'm gonna go ahead and clean the inside of the dresser. I start with a good vacuum. You always want to do this, especially with older furniture that's been maybe sitting in a garage or a shed or even in a thrift store. It's going to be dirty on the inside, so you always start with a good cleaning. Once the vacuuming is done, then I'm going to come in and give it a good scrub. I am just using plain old Dawn dish soap and hot water and scrubbing the inside of this piece. And you want to get all around the bottoms, the sides, the backs of the piece. And it's not the funnest part of furniture refinishing, but the last thing you want to do is have a dirty, stinky dresser for your client to take home. Sometimes you'll need to do multiple rounds of this. With this dresser, I did, I believe, 3 rounds of cleaning just to make sure I got all of the dust and grime. Look at this bucket of dirty water, you guys. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but it certainly isn't clean. My next step was using a product that I love. It's called Odor Bully, and this will get rid of any old, moldy smells that vintage furniture can sometimes have. This dresser really was not bad at all, but I've come to use this on almost all of my pieces. You just spray it in there, let it sit, and let it absorb the odors, and it works great. I find this at my local stores, but you can get it on Amazon too. While that's working, you guys, I'm lining the drawers of this piece with this beautiful paper that I also got on Amazon, and it coordinates so beautifully with that smoked paprika color that I'm using. And here's what the drawers look like painted with hardware and with that drawer liner. So, so beautiful. And now back to the frame of the dresser. So here I am, I'm gonna lay it down on its back, and I'm gonna clean the underside of the piece. Again, vacuuming it out for any dust or cobwebs. And while it's on its back, I'm gonna go ahead and sand down the parts that I filled with the Quickwood. So I'm using, I believe, 120 grit here just to get that sanded out smooth. And here I am coming back in with my second wood filler just to make sure that I don't see any signs of the veneer repair after the piece is painted. And then obviously I'll have to wait for this to dry and set up, and then I will sand it again just to make sure that it's all nice and smooth and ready for paint. Now, yet again, I'm moving the dresser up on its side so that I can sand the quick wood that I had to fill on this part of the dresser. And I'm just sanding it smooth again, making sure that it's all even with the existing veneer so that you don't see the signs of the repair once it is painted. I can't remember if I'm using 120 or 220 grit on this, but it's always safer to start with a higher grit. While I am over here, I'm just gonna go ahead and scuff sand that entire side of the dresser. And here we are moving it again. Luckily, this piece was not too heavy to do by myself, but you guys, this is one of the things with furniture refinishing. All right, let's scuff sand the entire piece. And I guess I was using 120 for this. So I'm sanding the entire top. And while I don't plan on keeping the wood because it's too damaged and honestly not really that pretty in my opinion, and I wanted to go for an all painted look on this piece, but I still wanted to make sure that top was nice and smooth. Now I'm going to fill it with yet another wood filling product that I use. This is Bondo Glazing and Spot Putty. Looks a little bit like a crime scene, but you guys, this stuff is amazing. It's for smaller dings and dents that you want to fill in, and then you put it on, it dries and cures pretty fast, and then you once again need to sand that back, and that's what I'm doing here. For this part, I am using 220 grit, not only to get the Bondo out, but also to smooth the entire top out. And look at that, you can see here where the Bondo filled in the deeper dings and scratches, and that's just gonna help you get a nice smooth finish underneath your paint. You won't see those large scratches under your paint, and that's what I love this product for. It is really, really good. Again, available at local hardware stores and Amazon. Let's continue on by scuff sanding the rest of the dresser. You want to make sure to get all the parts that are going to be painted because, like I said, this step is necessary to ensure proper adhesion of your paint. For scuff sanding, I typically use 220 grit because you don't really need to get down to the bare wood. You're just kind of scuffing up the surface just a little bit. So the higher grit is fine. And again, just make sure you're getting all of the areas that are going to be painted. I had to hand sand some of the detailed parts. Do you see that? And even with the hand sanding, there was still some kind of gunk left over in these grooves. So I just used a flathead screwdriver. Now you guys, finally for the fun part, it is time to paint the dresser. Again, the same tips that I gave before, long strokes, thin layers, and you want to use a light hand. Don't press too hard or glop on your paint. I typically start with the top of the dresser and then I make sure to get those edges right away so that you don't have any paint drips. And then I will move on to the sides and the front of the piece. This is one thing that I like to do. Do you see how I did like a horizontal swipe on the top and the bottom, and then I kind of fill it in with the long vertical strokes? I think it just helps to get a nice even smooth finish. And then of course I need to move on to the front and the detailed parts. I'm using the same brush here, but sometimes I have to use a smaller brush if the detailed parts are smaller, but it was perfectly fine on this piece. Now here's a slowed down version of that process I was telling you about. So I kind of start by making a horizontal swipe across the top, and then I bring a vertical swipe down, and then I'll do another horizontal swipe at the bottom, and it's kind of almost like my border. And then I'll go back up and do vertical strokes from top to bottom, making sure that I'm using light coats and a light hand. You don't want a super thick glob of paint on your brush because you are going to go back and do additional coats. So don't, even though the coverage is really good with this color, don't freak out if you see that the coverage looks uneven or if you see brush strokes. It will fill in with additional coats, at least with this paint. Again, reminder, this is Melange Paints. The color is Ember Rune. The primer and top coat are built in, so I don't even have to prime this piece, you guys. That's what makes this paint so easy to use. I will use a stain blocking primer sometimes if I am worried about bleed through. So if I'm going from like a dark wood to a very light color, I will use a stain blocking primer to keep those tannins in. Or if it's a super slick surface like laminate or something like that, I will use a bonding primer. Melange has both of those as well, but this piece, it wasn't necessary to use either. So I'm going right to the paint because the primer is already built in. Now this is just the first coat, you guys. I did do a total of 2 coats on this dresser. That's all that it needed. With this paint, I typically wait about an hour and a half between coats. After the paint was dry, the piece was ready to be put back together, staged, and photographed. All of the drawers were previously labeled on the bottom, so I knew exactly where to put them. But if you guys have a piece that is not already labeled, I highly recommend doing that. It makes it so much easier to put it together, and with vintage furniture, it can be tricky. Each drawer needs to go back in the exact right spot. I'm taking my microfiber cloth and just dusting it off a little bit. And now it is time to stage. You guys, I'll probably do a whole separate video on staging, but it's so important to make your piece look pretty. I mean, people are seeing the photographs. That's what's going to sell the piece. They want to picture it in their home. They want to see how pretty it is. You've put in all this work and effort. You want to make it look as good as possible. I was going for a boho vibe with this piece. It is a mid-century modern style, and that color just gave me all the boho vibes. So I grabbed lots of different baskets and bowls that I have. Almost everything that I'm using here, you guys, is thrifted. And if you watch my thrifting videos, you know that I always look for items that I can use in my home decor and staging, and this is a perfect example. I think there are like 2 or 3 items total in this whole setup that is not thrifted. When I stage my pieces, there's lots of moving things around, stepping back, looking at it, moving things around again, stepping back, looking at it. It does take a little bit of time. I thought for this piece, maybe I'd add one of my plants, but when I did and stepped back, I didn't really like how it looked. Usually I love the green, but I kind of wanted to keep this one a little bit more neutral. And then there's always just little adjustments here and there to get it looking just how I want it to. I think I've got it, so now it's time for photos. I use my Canon camera, which I love, but I know so many people use their phones, and that is perfectly fine. The quality is really great, but I've always used my camera. I love taking pictures. I make sure to get different angles, get close-ups, get pictures from far away. The most important thing when taking pictures is having good lighting. You want to make sure that the pictures show in their best light. Guys, look at the final product. Isn't it so pretty? Like I said before, this color is amazing. It is a deep kind of orangish red. One of my followers on Instagram described it as a spicy smoked paprika, and I really love that description. I love how the hardware placement turned out. I feel like if you didn't know that that initial handle was broken, you would never know that this isn't how it was supposed to look. I really love how the baskets and the bowls look with this color. I'm very happy with the final product. I do want to show it to you guys in different lighting though. Those first videos were taken during the day with full lighting, and this video was in the early evening, and you can see how the color deepens and changes a little bit. And I like to show that for potential buyers, not only of the piece, but buyers of this paint color, that it will change in your lighting. And that is just common knowledge, I think, but I feel like it's important to show you what it looks like during bright daylight and what it looks like at night. Either way, I love it in both. Overall, I'm very pleased with how this turned out. I think it's such a beautiful color. Here are some of the still shots that I took. I think my pictures really showcase the depth and beauty of this color. I absolutely loved using it. Remember, you can use my code JEN10 for 10% off your Melange orders. Thanks for being here, and thanks for watching.